Welcome, welcome. It is episode 6 of Tips and Tricks Tuesday today. So since we talked about in our previous episodes, headspace, physical creative space, we talked about our brushes in the last episode. I thought that it would be a great time now to talk about preparation for painting, which is can be different for different people depending on what medium you're going to be using to be creative, as well as it definitely depends upon whether or not you want to make your own canvas for painting. So for myself, at this point in time, I don't presently stretch my own canvases. I buy a canvas that is already treated. So there's two different types of canvas that I purchase. One is linen canvas. This canvas is already pre-treated. I don't know if you can see, there's kind of a bit of a shimmer to it. So they used what you call a clear gesso. And this kind of this kind of canvas can be used for acrylic or for oil, and it is pre-treated, so you can start painting as soon as you open it. As well, the other one that I purchased is this type of canvas, and again, it's pre-stretched, it's stapled on the back, and it comes already treated with the gesso. However, for myself and for my preference for painting, I always add another layer or two of the gesso. So those are two different, that is a treatment for your canvas or for the surface that you're going to be using to paint. You can also use gesso on wood and many other surfaces that you're going to paint to prepare it for the paint that you're going to use. I am going to prepare this today, so you kind of see the process. I do have a couple that I have treated just to make sure that there's not a lot of downtime when I'm doing this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the camera to my table. This is probably the cleanest my art table has ever been because I had to take everything off in preparation for this video, but that's super fun. So I'm going to just move you around a little bit so that you guys can see the process, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the process as I go. I'm just going to get a couple things out of the way. Let me know. Oops. Sorry. Let me know if you are, that's really frustrating. I'm very sorry. Sorry, that's very frustrating. It's hard when you have a small space, and because I am still getting fairly new to this, I still have, don't have all the tools I need. So let me know whether or not you can see my surface. I'm just going to push this table out a little bit more and come on in and show you how to prep. So the first thing that you need when you're preparing any canvas is obviously the tools to do so. And for me, I have a couple paintbrushes that I have strictly that I use strictly for applying the gesso. And one of them is obviously a wide brush because even though the canvases I have here are fairly small, and a lot of the ones you'll see, I do use smaller canvases, but I also have some larger pieces as well. So having a larger brush allows for easier application. I also use this foam brush for application when it's a smaller surface like this. It just allows me to cover the surface. And then when I have smaller pieces as well, I have an old brush that I also use for applying the gesso. The other material you'll need is a paper plate or a container that you can put the gesso into, so then you can apply it to the brush and paint. Obviously this is a small one because I'm going to be using the smaller foam brush today to apply it to the canvas. There are two different types of gesso, and gesso is a medium that you don't, sorry, that's ultra matte gel. I have clear gesso. It is a surface preparation. I use Liquitex. Again, I'm not brand loyal. I just happened to grab this in the art store. So what this does is it really just seals your surface. I did have the Ultra Matte gel out as well. It's a gel medium, because oftentimes to allow, once, I guess I can get onto that later, so I won't confuse you too much. You can get clear gesso, you can get, this one is transparent, so it dries without leaving any kind of color behind. You can get some gesso that is matte, to have a matte start to your canvas. So these two have already been prepared, and I don't know if you're going to be able to notice, probably not, because my camera doesn't seem to focus so much, but this has already been prepared, and I've taken it through all of the 3 steps that I'm going to go through with you today. This is still at step 2. So step 1 is obviously getting the materials you need. Step 2 is using your canvas. Now, like I had mentioned, this is already treated. The reason that I treat it again is just because I want to make sure that I have a surface that the paint isn't going to soak right into the surface. And I don't know how many layers of gesso has been applied to this, so I just like adding 1 or 2 extra layers. It seems to give me the kind of play that I want with the canvas surface, and it also just reinforces the paint on the canvas. So I haven't really applied a lot. You don't need, this doesn't need to be really thick, your first layer, because you're going to do 1 or 2 layers, simply just to make sure that the canvas is completely covered. So yeah, it's just as simple as applying the gesso, and you'll notice that this, your gesso is also textured. It's very textured. So it allows for you to, it's really easy to know where it is applied. So I apply a generous amount for the first layer, and one of the other things that helps the canvas is to also do the sides as well as the top and the bottom, all 4 sides and the top, not the bottom. Well, I guess you would be the bottom. So, just going to do this really quickly. You can hear it, it's kind of, I mean, the brush usually makes a noise on the canvas. One of the other things too is really important when you're applying this is that you have a tool that's clean. So I do clean these in between uses, but you want to make sure that before you apply any gesso that the tool that you're going to use is clean, and so that there's no bits that'll end up being from, you know, maybe you painted before. Or you definitely don't want to use a brush if the gesso is dried onto it, because it'll make it harder. And then one of the reasons I really like using this foam brush also is because it doesn't leave any brush marks. So one of the things that happens when I use this, even when I'm using a smaller canvas, you don't really get to, you get brush strokes. There are lines with this on occasion, but I mean, I'll show you why that doesn't really matter. 1, because this is the first coat, and 2, so I've applied it. I may have missed spots, but again, because this is a pre-treated canvas, and also because I'm going to be doing 2 layers of this gesso, it doesn't really matter that I've missed a couple spots, because I'll catch it on that second pass by with my foam brush. So I'm going to set this aside. It's ideal. You can either use a hairdryer to dry this, and that will allow you to really be able to apply the second layer sooner than it would if you're going to wait. So otherwise, you can use a hairdryer get the second coat on, or I'm going to set this one aside for now. And, sorry, just setting it aside. And I'm going to get this canvas. So this canvas needs a second coat. So before I go ahead and apply the second coat of gesso, one of the things that you want to do is you want to take a really thin piece of sandpaper. And one of the things, I don't know that you'll be able to see it on the canvas, but once you do this yourself, you'll see there is a texturization in the gesso, and sometimes there's these little bits that are left around, and you don't want those left on your canvas when you're going to paint. So I just take a really light piece of sandpaper and I just sand it off, and you can really tell when that spot's gone. Sometimes the other thing that happens if you're using a smaller brush, which I did on this canvas, I used a smaller brush and I have a lot of brush strokes through it. And again, like I said, that's fine for the first layer, but another way to, if this was the second layer, another way to get rid of those brush strokes is just to take that sandpaper and kind of just go over the area. So I'm not going to do that too much because I know it's pretty loud. But I'm not really sure if the camera really shows the brush strokes and there's little bits of gesso, a little hard, like if I were to pick that off. And you don't want to do that. You don't want to pick it off because then if you are on your last coat, you're going to leave a hole of where the gesso used to be. So that's what you do after your coat is dried. So again, like I said, you can use a hair dryer to dry it, or you can wait for it to dry. Usually drying could take about 1 or 2 hours. So it's not something that you have to wait for too long. The other thing with wood is the same thing. If you have a bunch of surfaces, so for myself, I like to work in groups. So if I have a bunch of canvases that's not treated, and again, you could start painting just as they are, but I just like to have that extra layer of protection underneath the paint so that, you know, it doesn't yellow, it doesn't, and you know, the elements don't, this gives it an extra layer of protection so the elements don't cause it to, here, you'll see it a little bit better. You can really tell it's white when you apply it, but this is translucent, so it will be clear when it dries. So you won't even be able to notice that it's actually on the surface. But again, just because this is a piece of wood and it's something that I'm going to be painting on, it kind of helps so that the paint, the wood doesn't absorb the paint as well. That's another bonus to using this if you're going to be using it on a wood surface. So again, just apply liberal amount. You won't be able to sand this one off as much, but I would suggest if you're going to be using wood or anything, like anytime you're applying this in between coats. So for the wood, for example, because this is the first treatment that I have with it, I will probably treat this with 4 different layers because again, it's going to help to maintain the color on the surface rather than soaking into the surface that we're using. So I would let that dry. I would use a hair dryer to make it to dry faster so that I can do my layers consecutively, because once you are finished, once you have your finished product, and you've sanded it, you want to wait 24 hours before you actually paint on the surface. You have to give it that little bit of time to set. So then you are ready to go. Now, I don't think I'm going to treat this one at this very moment because you've already seen me put on my layers, and I can't put on, oh, I was going to put, so second layer on this, I'm sorry that I can't really show you, but this has a lot of brush strokes because again, I was in a rush and I wanted to just get it done. So it does have some brush strokes throughout it. So that's one of those things where I will take the sandpaper and I will try to remove them. because this has had 2 coats, they should disappear. So one of the things you don't want to do is you want to go with the grain of the canvas, kind of similar to wood. You don't want to go in circles. You want to go with the grain so that you don't have any kind of because it'll show up in your painting is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, so that's pretty much it. It's pretty simple. Like I said, you can get different types of gesso. You can get matte, you can get clear, you can get just regular gesso, which is it's going to be white when it dries, which is kind of what this canvas would have been before it was treated. It's treated, and that's why, because it's white. So that is everything that I think I need to share with you today. So I just wanted to take an opportunity to thank you for joining me today, and I hope that you've enjoyed this. I hope that you take the time to treat your canvases if you plan on selling your art, and it's been a fun day today. So thanks for joining. Have a great day. Please like and share this video if you found it interesting and you know anyone that would be able to use this advice. Have a great day.